Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Victoria. I'm a senior software engineer here in EPAM Systems, and today I'm gonna give you a lecture on animations in JavaScript and CSS. So let me share my screen real quick. Cool. So animations, really useful and nice too to make our pages a little bit more alive. And there are a few ways that we can implement animations in our pages. But before we start talking about implementation of animations in JavaScript and CSS, I want to start a little bit from afar and talk a little bit about, whoops, yep, sorry, wrong order of the slide. Yeah, talk about how the browser renders a document, because this will be important in understanding which type of animation we would use in our application. So this is a rough schema of the work of the browser, how browser renders our document, our web page. So it starts with getting the data from the server. So server will return us HTML file. After some parsing, it will get some CSS as well as JS. The schema doesn't have this for now because we yeah, for now it's not important. So yeah, it's get the data from the server. It starts parsing it, creates JavaScript, HTML DOM and CSS DOM in parallel, as you can see. Then after two trees of HTML and CSS has been created, so kind of you can see this as you can see HTML document. So we have body. In this body tag we put, for example, main, footer, header, some divs, buttons, stuff like that. So we put one tag into another. It can be represented in the structure of a tree, as well as CSS DOM. When you write certain selectors in your CSS files, you create a tree. So CSS means cascade, styles, sheets. So reading from the title, you can say that it's kind of nesting structure. So tree is a nice way to look at this sort of structure. So after merging DOM with CSS DOM, so kind of map the elements in our DOM on the nodes in CSS DOM to apply certain styles, we come to a stage of the render of the page layout. Layout is responsible for putting our elements in certain positions. So basically attaching top and left properties to certain elements to understand where they would lay. Paint stage is important basically for let's say for coloring pixels on your page. To applying certain color most of the time to certain areas on your page. So these two stages of rendering the page are really important because they happen again and again in the life cycle of the page. So for example, I am clicking the button. I click the button or I hover it like this. Something happened on the page. For example, size of the button changes, or some window appears when I click the button. For example, I open some pop-up or stuff like that. This will usually trigger both of these stages. But what's important, some actions on the page can trigger only paint stage of the browser render in the page. Yeah. And paint in comparison to the layout is much less heavy operation. That's why when we do certain changes in the UI of our page, like when we animate certain things, we really want these changes to affect only paint stage and not trigger layout stage of this whole process. So the question is what changes on the page may trigger reflow or re-layout and which trigger repaint. Basically, it comes from the purpose of the stages. Anything that change the position of your element, if you change the margin, if you change position, if you change width, anything like that, size of a border even. If something influence position of the element on the page, if, for example, sometimes when you change the size of the element, it changes, it like push different it neighbors further down or to the right. All these changes will trigger layout because we basically changing position, the area where we see our element. That's why in order to change the position of the element, we want to kind of fake change of the position, let's say like this. And there are some tools, some CSS properties that allow us to do that. The triggers only paint, kind of faking moving of the element by just recoloring certain pixels on your page. Yeah, so most, let's say, most of the changes that you do with CSS animations can be done just triggering paint stage of the draw of the document. That's why we most of the time, if we can, we try to use CSS. They're less heavy than JavaScript animations. They're more performable that way. They need less effort from the browser to compute them. And why we will talk about it a bit later. So most of the time, we want to work with CSS animations. And yep, give me a second, please. Yeah, I'm back. So CSS animation, good tool to animate something on your page. And there are certain properties that allow us to do so. Yeah. For example, property from CS3, transform, allow us to apply some transformations to the element. The syntaxes of this property is show. We put transform. We put here some method. Looks like JavaScript code method. Different methods I list a bit lower, and we pass some properties as if it was some function. Basically, is a function. So yeah, let's go like this. So the example of the certain methods of the property transform are listed on your screen. We can do 2D transformations and we can do 3D transformations. Starting from the 2D, we can do, for example, translate of the element. We kind of move it to a certain position. And this property is very useful, again, in scope of this topic, because transform property doesn't trigger call of the layout stage. For example, you might be tempted to use for this sort of animation change of the margin or padding or position of the element. For example, applying some position absolute and changing top or bottom. And top and bottom of properties of your element. And unfortunately, this won't be very performable because this will trigger layout stage of the browser. That's why for this certain animations, you want to use transform property of the CSS. For this meta translate, X and Y, X and Y will tell you where this element will be moved, starting from the position where it's already in. There's another method, rotate, allows you to rotate at a certain angle your element. Scale will change the size of your element, and really important to understand that this won't work same as if you change width and height of the element, because this will basically make everything in your element bigger. So here you can see the text, for example, is really small, not really small, just regular. If we apply certain scale for this component, the text of this element became larger too. Though this property can be really useful, some kind of bouncing animation when, for example, you click on the button and it's kind of bounced up and down to create certain effect of the, I don't know, 3D line of the button. And yep, sorry, give me 1 second. I need the order of the slides for some reason changed. Okay, we're on screen. Yeah, I'm back. So yeah, the other property that we can apply through transform for 2D transformation is skew method. It kind of skews your element for again, for some bounding animations can be used or sort of thing. So you kind of change the angles from top and bottom right of your element. Also, there is a way to apply every transform that you want to apply by one single property, matrix. For example, if you want to apply scale and angle at the same time, or rotate, sorry, at the same time, you can put them with matrix. And the example of certain animation here. So here I created a div. Oops, spoiler. Here I created a div with some width, height, background, doesn't matter really. What's matter is this two selectors. So to apply transformations, I set transform 2 seconds. This will say how long transformation of the transformation will go. And on hover, I say, hey, rotate my div 180 degrees. Why I put this property not on a hover, but on the div itself? If I put this only on hover, this 2 seconds will be applied only to hover animation. So when I kind of blur, so I move my mouse from the element, this 2 seconds won't be applied. That's why this rotation will happen immediately. And that's not always the case. Usually we want this smooth kind of thing to be applied, and this doesn't work. Perfect. Oh yeah, I missed the double quote, this thing. That's why it doesn't work. Yeah, so here you can see transform 2 seconds doesn't work. That's why it happened immediately. If I put this two dots here, this would work. Maybe I can open it. Yep, so let's put it here. Oops, So doesn't work. Okay, live demos never work. Never mind. Yep. So moving forward to the 3D animations, we can move our elements what would look like in a 3D. So same thing, we use method and property, but methods are just a little bit different. So for example, we use rotate to rotate our element kind of in one 2D dimension, 2D, just in one 2 dimensions where we have width and height. If we want to, for example, rotate our element in 3-dimensional way. So when we have x, y, x, y, and z, we can do this with this sort of a property. And this where matrix might come in hand, or if you want, for example, to rotate your element by x and by z, for example. So here you see how this transformation is different from the one we used when we've been doing this in 2D. So here you see we just use rotate and put an angle, so it's kind of just rotate in a dimension of our screen. If we use 3D method to do that, it use different different alignment of the main dimensions here. So to put this in an example, here again, same animation, just I used not just rotate, I used rotate by Y, again 180 degrees, but see, I kind of flipped my element on the other side, what looks like it. And see again, it also flipped my text, not only the div itself. So this is how you can use 3D animation for that meta. And this sort of a rotation thing in 3D can be useful if you, for example, want to animate, I don't know, some card game when you open card and close card and you kind of need to match similar ones. So this is where it can be useful again to open sort of items on your page, on your cards, to do it more alive way. Yeah, so in order to make stuff more, let's say more smooth. So for our animation, like here, you have an immediately again transform. Where is it? Transform, 2 seconds, doesn't really work here. We need to use transitions. So transition help us to apply animations for different CSS changes smoothly or with a delay. I guess in here it was just a typo. It should have been transformed. Yeah, that's why it didn't work. Yep. So in order to do certain animations more smoothly, not in this kind of immediate way, to make it even more beautiful, we can use transition property from CSS3. So in order to apply this, we need to specify which properties should be transitioned and for how long time. Sometimes we can also add a transition delay, and we can see that a bit later. So yeah, so when you apply transition to a certain property to happen like smoothly with certain in certain like time, not in immediate way, you might want this change to be applied not just in a linear way, but in a sort of a For example, in the start, it will happen more quickly, and till the end, it will happen more slower. So to do that, you can use different timing functions. And here in the link, you can find example of how they work. So linear will apply your change similarly all the way till the end of your animation. If you use, for example, is in, is out, is and out, it will change how your application will be applied. So this is kind of time to progress, let's say like this, or change of your property function. Also, if you want to apply some more of a flexible function for your time, you can use cubic Bezier function. Here is a nice example of how it changes the graphic of the time function. So here you see time and progression. Progression is a change of your property. For example, width will go from the one that is default to the one that you applied through the time. And yeah, this you can add more dots to this cubic Bezier. You can find already pre-created functions. Really useful thing if you want to make your application more I don't know, custom, though usually this more than enough. So we talked about delay of the transition. Again, we can add this, for example, if you want to make start of the animation happen a bit later at time. So here I hovered my div. So here you can see I applied transition on width to happen for 2 seconds. So my animation will last for 2 seconds. And I say I want it to be delayed for 1 second. And here on hover, I'm changing the width to 300 from default 100. So this tells me that width on hover, width of my element will change to 300 pixel in a linear using linear time function. So default one is linear. So 1 pixel per 1 second, for example, for 2 seconds with delay of 1. So this is how it would look like. I can stop it at any point, and it will proceed to go further. And again, every time I hover, it doesn't start immediately, it goes with a bit of a delay. Yeah, and eventually I can combine transition that we talked about just now and transformation that we talked about a little bit earlier. So I want to transform my my div. Somehow I want to rotate it for 100 degrees. I want to change width and height of this element, and I want it to happen smoothly. So I add transition on my div. I say I want to change width for 2 seconds, height for 2 seconds, and I want transform to be applied also for 2 seconds. All things will happen in hover, and this is how it would look like. Beautiful, awesome. Yeah, this will allow you to do stuff like that. So this is how you can apply transitions, different properties of the transitions to your element, or you can do this in sort of a line, just applying one way. So first one goes which property you want to transition, the second property for how long, the third attribute is the timing function that you apply to your transition, and the last property, last attribute is how long will animation wait before starting. So it's the delay of your animation, of your transition. Yeah, not all properties can be transitioned. So, for example, it just comes from the basic understanding Like, for example, you cannot change transition display property or position, stuff like that. They're not transitionable. They cannot be transitioned. Yep, cool. Before we go further, maybe you already have some questions to me. Maybe I should do something. Or I should tell you something more about transition, transform. Maybe you have more questions about this, how the browser works. I'm happy to answer your questions. Okay, if no, let's go further to more complex animations. And this property that allows you to do crazy stuff like this came again with CSS third version, and they give you more flexibility in the way of creating animation. So the first one is a keyframe. It's sort of it's a rule where you can define how properties of your element will change through the course of time. You can specify every second, every dot of your of animations of change of your properties. So this is how we define this. So we use this symbol, we use keyword keyframe, and we name our animation a certain way. From to define from what state to what our element will go. So here we change our background color from red to yellow. Then to apply this keyframe, I use property animation. Here I specify all attributes of the animation separately. So use animation name example here from keyframe, and I say I want this to last 4 seconds. Pay attention that animation won't work if animation duration property wasn't specified. So this sort of thing won't work as it was with transform. It cannot happen immediately. It needs some sort of duration. Also, you can use not only from to property, I don't know, keys, but percentage of the kind of flow of the time of your animation. So here I want to start from background color red. In the middle, I want it to be changed to green, and I want to finish with yellow. So this is again what happened smoothly through the 4 seconds course of the time. Every change will happen like gradually. The color will change from red to green. Yep. So here we'll see sort of an example. Again, we can apply animation delay for our animation. So here, if you pay attention when the page loads, it waits for some time. Here I specified 2 seconds, and only then it starts our animation. Here you can see I applied multiple different properties to be changed. Really nice tool to apply different properties. Someone is not muted. Yep, thank you. Cool. So another property of the animation attribute is iteration count. So we can specify how much time we want our animation to repeat. Here I specified 3, but if you want this to happen forever, let's say like this, like while our page is live, you can also specify infinite property and call it a day. It will go forever. So here again, if we pay attention, this goes 1, 2, and 3. And that's it. So it stopped. So, yeah, property animation directions specify how our animations iterations will go. So here, I applied direction alternate. This is more interesting than reverse. So reverse, it kind of speaks for itself. It would go another way around. So here I specified it will go goes from light blue to pink to orange. If you put animation direction reverse, it will go from orange to pink to light blue. Simple as that. But if I apply alternate direction, it will go a bit more differently. So pay attention. We go from blue to pink to orange, then back to pink, and then back to light blue, and again to pink, and then orange again. And we're done. So we went 3 times through our animations, but went like forward, back, forward. This is a nice way to, again, make your animations a bit smoother. So here in this animation flow, nice thing is that we kind of specify that we will end up in the same position as we started here in the 0 position. But if we just use reverse or normal position, normal direction of flow of our animation, it won't be that smooth. So let's just see an example. Let's just remove that. And let's see. So we went from blue to pink to orange, and again, like immediately went back to blue, and again to blue. This is not this is not usually the case. We want our animation to be smooth. So if you work with specific iteration count, or even if you use like infinitive iteration count, so every time you specify how many iterations should go, it's recommended to pay attention to this animation direction property to make your animations look smoother. Yep, give me please just a second. I think my battery will go down. I'll be just in a minute. Sorry for that. Cool, I'm back. My laptop is charging. Perfect. So again, as we can apply our animation smoothly with this property, we can specify certain timing function again. Everything is the same as with transition property. This is example like level 1 how they go. So here linear goes smoothly through the course of the time. This one goes faster from the beginning and slower to the end. Again, just a nice demo of the stuff, how this works in a more practical way. Yeah, again, animation property can be written a bit more shorter than this kind of separate way. But sometimes if you want to specify, for example, some global properties for the animation, for example, for all your application, you want only use timing function is in. This is absolutely your way to go. And then in the specific elements, you would specify other properties like keyframe or timing or delay and stuff like that. So again, the first one is the name of your animation or name of your keyframe, then the duration of your animation, then your timing function, delay, how many times should your animation be repeated, and direction of your animation. Yep, so there are a lot of things that you can make with CSS and only with CSS. So all these examples has been made only with CSS, and they just show what impressive things you can do without applying JavaScript. So here just some widgets. It's more of a more applicable example than to it was before that. So here just some nice change of the properties and hover. This bounce up and down. So property transform scale was applied here. So here we kind of rotate, scale our card here. So if you look here, it's kind of at the angle a bit. Yeah, CSS would also allow us to create this nice parallax effect of the application. So here you can see that this layer moves more than the one after it. So this little thing almost doesn't move. The one that represents sort of a mountain moves even less, and the background doesn't move at all. Yeah, and this is just a cool thing that was also created only by using CSS. Not too much of it, but Sass has been used here, so kind of mixins and functions can be used, so it makes code a little bit less, but again, cool thing that we can do stuff like that without any JavaScript at all. So it rotates, it creates this circles, it kind of mesmerizing. Yeah, and cute stuff like this also can be created only by CSS. So probably this deer was created with SVG, probably, and it was also animated by only by using CSS animation. The last one, again, parallax. We have particles here, but also not really easy thing to animate because we have a lot of kind of little instances. If we would do this with JavaScript, it would be much more heavy in sort of performance than when we use CSS for that. Yep, and just an honorable mention. A little bit of JavaScript has been used here, but again, how cool is that? It also uses some, it listens to your voice. So yeah, just a cool thing to check a bit later. I think you can do stuff with this, but it's an iframe, probably doesn't look really nice. Yep. So this is it about CSS animations that require well. Yep, absolutely. Yep, so this is it for CSS animations. Maybe you have questions about this topic, like CSS animations and stuff. You have time to answer it now, or to ask this now, because yeah, we'll move forward to JavaScript.
Can I?
Yep, sure.
Yes. So I'm interested how these animations are communicated between a designer and developer. Like, does, for example, when design is static, designer is giving PSD file or some other format, and it's understandable. And how about animation? Like, does a designer give video, and then what tool a developer can use to get all these details like timing and this stuff?
Okay. Good question. Thank you. So usually, if you come in a project, there is already some amount of pre-created animation. So the question is only how to create them in the first place. Yeah. So after that, designer would just say, "You hey, just use our default like bounce animation on this button and use a fade animation on this text that we use everywhere, and let's give it a go." If it's, for example, a case where we need new animation, it's really rare, but it happened. Or if we just start a new project and we need to define this animations. There are tools, yeah, as you mentioned, where in which we communicate with designers. For example, one of them is Figma. So we don't really, yeah, I cannot show you that, sorry. So yeah, one of them is Figma. This is a tool to collaborate, to simplify collaboration between designer and developer. It allows you to allow designer to create like a layout, apply some, show some changes of the designs, how they work and stuff like that. Another tool, I think it's InVision, called InVision. Yeah, again, another way to collaborate from between designer and developer, and they also provide tools to make designs interactable. So designer, if he pay a little bit more attention to his prototype, can make a bit of the demo of how stuff should work. So at the end, what developer would get is kind of a example of the page where he can click on the items and certain things will pop up with animations or without them, however designer would like. So answering your question directly, there are tools like this, like InVision and Figma, for example, that allows designer to specify exactly seconds, changes, transitions, what property should be changed and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yep, moving to JavaScript animations. JavaScript is used usually in situations when we need to do some really complex animations or animations that can't be simply implemented with CSS when we need high control, for example, of what's happened. And usually when we implement some JavaScript animations, we simply use intervals or timeouts, whatever you like, in order to change some properties over time. Again, pay attention here. We created some function with if else, and if we write when we want our animation to be finished. For example, we want to animate appearance of some list of items on the page, and we want to animate appearance of every single item, for example. And the rule for stop of the animation will be that we get to the end of this list, or in a more complex way, we would go for timing. Like if the timing came to the end, like for example, we put 5-second time frame, like here, we probably would use this to define, okay, now now when we start the animation, we save this property, and then we compare for it to the time that's spent. In else, we usually write our code, how we want to change styles of our element. So here's a more of a hands-on example. So here I have my div. I have an ID of the timeout, so I can clean it, interval, so I can clean it later. I apply some event listener, my move on click on this button. Here I found it. My move function, what it does is finds element, child element. It's this one, the gray block of in our page. So it finds it. It defines its current position at 0, and just for the safety, we clear our interval to just start over to be sure that nothing has happened. So then we define how frames would change. So we want to stop at position 50. So if this position of the element is 50, we clear interval. This is what I've been telling you that we write in this if statement. So if we reached the end of the if we reached our desirable position, we want our animation to stop. Else, if we didn't reach our position, we want to proceed. So we kind of increment the position, and we apply this incremented position as a top and left properties of our element that we find. So we set up our interval, we set up this frame function to happen every 10 milliseconds, and let's see how it goes. Awesome, smoothly, beautifully, but the problem is that we change top and left properties. Again, as I told you, this will trigger layout changes of the call of the reflow or relayout state of the paint of the browser. So that's not good. And from JavaScript, like that, with set interval and stuff, we cannot really change, transform, translate these beautiful properties. We can just manipulate with this one. So, yep. And so imagine the situation when we want to do these things to multiple elements, and it won't start at the same time. For example, we have 3 identical elements. For one, it starts right when we click. For other, it have delay of 1 second, and for the last one, it has a delay for 2 seconds. So this would be hard to put in one set interval. We cannot do that. We would need to create 3 separate set intervals, and this is already a problem because browser, if we run them separately, browser would have to repaint not only every frame for one element in every 10 milliseconds, but usually more often. That's not good because our browser can be already busy with certain CPU load and stuff like that. So this can break the smoothness of our animation and will give our browser work that it basically shouldn't do. So how to break this kind of cursed circle? We can use request animation frame. Yep, that's the same slide. We can use request animation frame property. It allows a browser to optimize animations for you. You do not need to care how many animations you start and what time. If you wrap all your animation with request animation frame, it will kind of sync them and start whenever it needs them to start. It will repeat them not every 10 milliseconds, but whenever it needs to, whenever it think it's possible to do. It won't break smoothness of your animation. Everything would go in more of an optimized and better way with request animation frame. So it will trigger repaint of the page only whenever it think it should be done, based on its CPU load and stuff like that. Also, when you use request animation frame, your animation won't be started on the background. So when pages on the background, repaints won't happen. So it's again a nice thing for your browser to not load it when user, for example, like here, I don't look at this page. I don't need any animation to happen here. So this is also a nice optimizational thing that request animation frame gives us. And yeah, as well as with timeouts or interval, we can cancel our animation frame just by using the ID that returns from calling request animation frame function. So, example. We have an element, nothing special, just div with ID, simple CSS properties, nothing fancy. What we do in JavaScript to animate it? We created, let's start from here. So I have my element, and on click of this element, I will do this. I will call this animate function. What this animate function get? It gets some configurational object with duration, timing, and draw. Duration, simple. Our animation should last for 1 second. Timing. This specifies our timing function, as well as we did with transform, transition, or keyframes before in CSS. Here we also can specify certain timing function for our changes, though here we have to write this function ourselves. So here is the example of linear function for this sort of way. And the draw. Draw is also a method that will basically specify how our element would change through time. So here we'll get a progress attribute that would we use to calculate width of our element. So kind of this animation frame will give us the progress of this animation. And we will use this to specify the changes we want to do. So if we go to this animate function and check what it does, first of all, we get the current time when we started our animation. So here I fire this function on click, so it will get the start time of our animation. Here, this is the default object of the browser. It will, if we call performance.now, we will get time since the page was started. We also can use like day.now, but we don't really need that. We're okay with time since the page was open. So then we run request animation frame function. Here we pass callback. This callback again looks bulky, but simply same as this thing. So we kind of fire request animation frame and pass the callback. So this callback will happen for certain time, which we'll define a bit later, for the certain time, and will be optimized by your browser by default. So here we pass this function, this callback. What it does, it gets time fraction. This time fraction, it goes from 0 to 1, simply as the graphic of your timing function go here. So we go from 0 to 1. 0 is a start, 1 is a finish. So we just define, so time minus start. Start is this thing. We subtract on duration. Duration we passed here in the properties of our animate function. This is how we will know time function in this range from 0 to 1, kind of a process of our process of the changes of our properties of our element. So then if the time fraction goes more than 1, we should specify that it's 1, just so we kind of finish our animation. This might happen because of this. So here, this is how we calculate our timing function. And yes, this should go from 0 to 1. But if we use something more specific than linear function, for example, is in, or some complicated cubic Bezier function for change of the progress to due time, it can sometimes a little bit extend 1, just because JavaScript, unfortunately, not that good for calculations, unfortunately. So this is just a not a precaution, but yeah, for our own safety. So then we calculate the progress using our time function and passing there our time function, time fraction. After that, using our progress, we draw it. So draw, again, we passed here from to our animate property. Here you can see we use progress to change width of our elements through time. If time fraction less than 1, so that means that we didn't finish, we call our request animation frame again. So this is a recursion. So we call our function again and again till we exceed certain rule. So here, if our time fraction goes more than 1, our recursion would stop. We won't go further again. So here, our time fraction is 1. We reach our progress. It will be also 1. So we the end of our animation would come when width of our element would go to the 100. Here how it looks like, kind of this loading bar looks like it. So this animation, this is a nice example of how we can use request animation frame, but everything that was written here can be much more easily be written in CSS. So don't take this example for granted. You don't want to write this sort of animation with request animation frame. Use this for much more complicated stuff. To do the same thing mostly with CSS, you would just apply certain class on click on your element, and in the CSS for this class you will specify certain transform, translate, transition properties, maybe keyframe, animation. This is how we usually do if we need to do something on certain event from JavaScript. So yeah, just keep attention on that. Yep. So Yeah, maybe you have a question so far because it's not really an easy topic to understand. Can be a bit complicated.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you just mentioned that just adding and removing class on some event can deal with this kind of animations instead of JavaScript animations. So when we really need JavaScript animation, like when there is no way to make same with CSS.
Yeah, so if to think about it, like 90% of the time, yeah, you can deal with all the stuff just with CSS. But for example, if there is a complicated parallax, so where is this example? It was oh no, this one. So sometimes, for example, in our pages, we need to do some sort of a complicated parallax when we open one kind of slide one element on another on a scroll. This is just a simplified version of this thing. Not always we can do same only with CSS. So let me just maybe show you an example. So Apple make this nice animations usually when they present their products. Maybe with iPhone. Yeah, so here you can see we kind of started the video, we moved this video up, we kind of fade this thing away. We this probably a video or a GIF. We cannot start it with the JavaScript without JavaScript. Again, some sort of video or a GIF. This doesn't look really complicated, so probably this animations we won't be able to do is simply doing CSS. Though we can try. So this answering your questions, there are really specific cases for JavaScript animations, and when you face this sort of situation, you would know. But one of the examples is really complex parallax effects.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So, yeah, recently, but yeah, not so recently, we got Web Animations API in browsers. It doesn't support it in Internet Explorer, unfortunately, and I'm not sure if how it's supported in Edge. But yeah, this specification came, I think, in 2012, so quite a while ago, but it's not very popular thing yet. But it's a really nice tool if you want to kind of combine CSS flexibility of the properties with JavaScript optimization and stuff without using request animation frame. So here's how it would look like. So we kind of get our element from the DOM, call animate function of it, specify keyframes and certain options. So here I specified keyframes, I specified object of options. Here I specified only timing, duration, and how many times I want it to happen. Here I used JavaScript object infinity. I get my element, I call this function, I put these properties here. So here you can see I can use transform, which I couldn't do with request animation frames or iterations, for example. That's easily, so that would require us to change too many things. This is again just a very, very simplified property, simplified example of what we can do. Again, there is no reason to animate this thing this way with web animation API, though this might be useful if you want again to implement some things on using JavaScript. Why this example with parallax might be the case for using JavaScript animations. You might want to specify exact position on the page where you want sliding to start. You need more complex calculation for that matter than CSS can allow you to do. That's why we might end up using JavaScript, but again, we might still want to use transform, translate, maybe not rotate, but like moving stuff up with transform, just with more of a complicated calculations of numbers, of positions and stuff like that. This is a nice way to go away from request animation frame, still having this nice way of performance of the changes without this pain in the neck with defining this cycles and intervals, recursion, stuff like that. Everything really human readable, understandable from the beginning. But again, the problem is that it's not really a popular solution now, probably because of the support of the in the browsers. Though again, if you really want to, you can use polyfill for that matter. So this is a nice thing to adapt in your application, I think. Yep, so it allows us to do a lot of things. You can read about them if you're interested here. Different properties, you can specify different options for this sort of things like durations, easing and delay, iterations, composites, different sort of stuff. It has also different methods. So when we call element.animate, we return animation object. This one. And this allows us to use stuff like pause or play, for example. So if we want a certain time to stop our animation where it is, or run it again from the place it was ended, we can do this with animation API. So here I stop my animation where it was and I'm starting it again. Stop, start, stop, start. Cool. Very flexible. Not a lot of code has been written for that. So this code is to apply event listeners. So we can even ignore this. So this is what was done to do this sort of animation. Yeah. Basically, that's it from my side. If you want to read a bit more about every topic that has been discussed here on certain slide, there are this 3 dots more line. This is always a link where you can read about topic a bit more. So yeah, this is your way to go. I share the link to this presentation with organizers and they share it with you. So, do you have any questions to me about the animations? This is your last chance to ask it. About any topic we discussed today? No? Okay, then. Thank you guys for being here. It was a pleasure to give you a lecture. See you next time and bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Thank you.